So many of you have probably seen this video before, and I've seen it many times in the past. But this year I was listening to it, and something caught my attention that I've always missed. This is, about Albert Pike and the three world wars vision he claimed that he had, that somehow a Catholic priest in Chile is the one, though, that published his Albert Pike's dream. Through my own research, I found out that Pike was working for the Pope these many years. He has a medallion on, was it the Cross of Lorraine, which is only given by the Pope to certain subjects. So, it's a Catholic conspiracy, right? All roads lead to Rome, right? But I want you to hear this part, and then I'm going to tell you what I think it means, because there was some other stuff I've been looking into, and it finally, I think, made its full connection and made sense.
In Santiago, Chile, who wrote in 1925 a book called The Mystery of Freemasonry Unveiled. And in this book, in 1925, it is said that he wrote a letter to a man named Mazzini, in which he described this dream. And in the dream, he predicted 3 world wars. The First World War, he said, must be brought about, and I'm quoting from Albert Pike. The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the British and German empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. Now, students of history will know that Otto von Bismarck forged certain alliances between 1871 and 1898, which brought about this war, this World War I. And Otto von Bismarck here says that he was a co-conspirator with Albert Pike, and he was the one instrumental in bringing about the First World War. Well, that's the First World War. Then he dreams that there must be, he is given in this visionary dream, a Second World War. Now remember, this was in 1925 that it became public in this book written by a cardinal from Santiago, Chile, Rodriguez. He says, quote, the Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism will be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would then be restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. Well,
pause right there. Did you hear that? World War II, in their opinion, was used to bring about the restraint and the restraining of Christendom, Catholicism. But it's stating there that it will also be held back for the time that they need it in the future. I'll play it one more time. Listen closely.
This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism will be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would then be restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. Well, there are some who may argue that the terms Nazism and Zionism were not known in 1871. You should remember, however, that the Illuminati invented both of these movements. In addition, communism as an ideology and as a coined phrase originates in France during the Revolution. In 1785, Restif coined the phrase 4 years before the Revolution broke out. Restif and Babeuf, in turn, were influenced by Rosé, as was the most famous conspirator of them all, Adam Weishaupt. Then he has this vision, in this vision, not only one world war and two world wars, but here comes the third world war. He says, and I quote, "The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world." Yeah, that's what he says. The war, this was 1925. Please understand that. At least 1925. May go all the way back to 1871, as is purported to do, but at least it was written in a book and published in 1925. So he says, after World War I was just over a few years, and before World War II even started, he's now thinking about this Third World War, and it says that it will be caused by the differences between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the State of Israel, mutually destroy each other. That's what it says. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm in which, in all its horror, will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin and savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. So he's against Christianity and he's against atheism. They're supposed to fight each other to the death, you see. Then, he says, everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will, from that moment, be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowledge where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer.
Pause right there. So did you see what he said there? With the multitudes disillusioned with Christianity. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, but does that saying that the majority of people have been touched by Christianity and they're still delusional about it in their head, right? He's saying that they will have a hope, they will have knowledge, but they don't know where to direct their knowledge. And when this religion that's been oppressed, or I'm sorry, has been put on the back shelf, all of a sudden can now emerge. They're already Christians. You bring up Catholicism again. Catholicism is the answer, but who's sitting on the throne of Catholicism now? Lucifer. Now watch this. Now I want you to listen to this because this is where I think the whole idea of holding off Catholicism, it connected to me, okay? And there was other stuff, you know. You hear them talk about the Mormon temple in the square in Utah. I mean, all the square, Jupiter, Saturn, Kronos, and all that stuff. I mean, this is so. And what we have we were looking at some of the definitions there in that that Mason dictionary. I can't remember the name of the god that was connected to Jupiter, but this stuff's just sounding too familiar. Listen to this.
Legal ownership and raw power, they are only 5.2 million pawns. All of this is part of a secret kingdom that Jeffrey K. has called the, quote, invisible empire, unquote, and about which most Mormons have only the vaguest notions, if they have any notion at all. This theocracy is alluded to by Apostle Bruce R. McConkie. Quote, "Through this church and kingdom, a framework has been built through which the full government of God will eventually operate," unquote. That, quote, "full government of God," unquote, involves what is known as, quote, "united order," unquote. Revelations that came through Joseph Smith described it as a theocratic, communistic society. All property and income was to be given over to the control of the church and then distributed to everyone according to his need.
That was another part, all property and income given over to the church. That's starting to remind me of the way the Moors talk about how their temple needs to be set up, where nothing is in anyone's names, but everything is in the name of the temple, right?
The brethren defined it so that, quote, "the poor shall be exalted in that the rich are made low," unquote. Those who transgressed were to be put out of the church, in which case the property they had given into the treasury would not be returned to them. Serious.
And that's another thing. I want to bring up a video later on, because there's a form, the 1450 form, connected to the United States Treasury. I want to show you this because I really want people's input. I tried asking some other people and no one really would get back to me on this form. So that's just keep that in mind, the Treasury.
Problems prevented full implementation of the, quote, "united order," unquote. You see, until now, it never really worked. However, the Mormon Church still looks forward to the day when these revelations of God through the prophet will be fulfilled and Mormon theocratic communism firmly established worldwide. And that can only happen when the church has taken full political power. When that time comes, woe to all who transgress the laws of the Mormon gospel. Excommunication with loss of earthly property will be supplemented, ladies and gentlemen, with the death penalty. The United Order is in reality the total makeup of the full body of the Illuminati.
Did you hear that? A loss of earthly possessions, right? A total loss of all your earthly possessions means death, right? What happens to everybody that's alive right now that doesn't have a trust, that's not protected? You know what I'm saying? It's not protected in any means. That's just out here, I wake up, I think about money. I go to bed, I think about money. Blank feelings, it's all about money. Blank holes, blank him, it's all about that dollar. But it's nothing about anything to protect you, right? It's nothing about building for the future. I was a quote I heard by a Native American. It was Native Americans, how did it say? Something about, it is selfish to think of ourselves. We must always think about our future, children.
All of the different organizations will come together to rule the world. There is a doctrine, an ancient pagan doctrine of blood atonement connected to the Mormon Church. And since the early days of the church, it has always been Mormon doctrine that, quote, "under certain circumstances, there are some serious sins for which the cleansing of Christ does not operate, and the law of God is that men must then have their own blood shed to atone for their sins," unquote. It is generally thought that these serious sins are in the category of murder and adultery. However, this is not clearly defined in Mormonism. Brigham Young, a 33rd degree Freemason, said that, quote, "any man or woman who violates the covenants made with their God will be required to pay the debt. The blood of Christ..."
Wait, and that's the second Mason, right? Because Joseph Smith, a 33rd